mute yourself, and if there is any question, you can unmute and ask during the session. So to get started, welcome everyone to another session of Alumni Talk series by Biotech Research Club. Today we have with us Dr. Poornima Kolhar, who is in a way very special to us. She is one of the first students to pass out from the Department of Biotechnology, first batch of students to pass out from the department since its establishment. She was a batch. She was from the batch 2016.
Six.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. 2006. I made a mistake. So after her BTech from here at the department, she went on to pursue a PhD from the University of California, Santa Barbara, from the Department of Biomolecular Sciences and Engineering, under Professor Samir Mitrikoti and Eric Roslati. Where she worked on biomaterial design for specific cellular interactions, and she's also worked on nanoparticles to improve the drug delivery. And she was also working on polymer synthesis, synthetic polymers to grow stem cells. During her PhD, she was also working at Sanford Burnham previous medical discovery center. She received her PhD in 2012. So after her PhD, she went on to work at Theranos, which is a healthcare company. She worked there until 2016. Until 2016, after which she rather took up a different path and pursued management studies at the Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania. Right. During her undergraduate program here at IITM, she was also awarded the summer internship.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. She was also selected for the summer internship program, where she did her summer internship at IIC Bangalore. She also did another internship at Biocon Bangalore again. So during her PhD, she was awarded with the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine Fellowship and the Rathman Fellowship, both during her tenure of PhD. So we are very happy to have you here today, and we are very, very glad that you came forward to share your wisdom with us today. Thank you so much. Over to you, Poornima.
Oh, thank you so much, Nandakumar. That was an amazing introduction. For a second, I was like, "Is he really talking about me?" When you started telling about IISc, I was like, "Wait, like I was awarded something in IIT. It's such a long time ago." Yeah, thank you for that great introduction. I sound like a celebrity right now from whatever you have said. Yeah, so I was thinking, what should I share in this conversation? I think there is a lot of different angles that I can talk about. There is, of course, what I learned, doing various things that I have done. There's, of course, the whole thing about career transitions, because I have made a couple of career transitions, and I'm actually making one right now. So we can talk about career transitions. We can talk about just the PhD or just the MBA, whichever you want, or management consulting, whatever you guys want to talk about. So one thing Nandakumar did not talk about is after I did my MBA, I worked in a management consulting firm, and I worked in their healthcare vertical. The name of the firm is LEK Consulting, and I'm actually I just left LEK last week. And I'm joining a healthcare machine learning data company in the Bay Area. I'm joining there as a product manager. So yet another slight change. I think this is not a major change, but it's still a change, because I'm going from being a management consultant to being a product manager for a technology product. So yeah, so that's something that's happening right now. I'm joining them on Monday. So anywho, if you guys have questions around those, we could talk about that too. So I know you had mentioned to me that you usually have like a 40-minute talk with 20-minute question session. I think I want to change it up a little bit. I have a couple of stories that I wanted to say. I don't know how much time it will take because I've not told them before. So I think it will be like 30 minutes maybe. And then and those are not related to career transitions as such. So maybe we can spend the rest of the 30 minutes with people asking me questions about whatever they want to. Ideally, I think this session would have been better if it was all about question and answer. But now that we have decided on this pattern, I'll just go ahead with this, and I'll try to save as much time for questions about career options and transitions and even what happened in IIT. Whatever you guys want to know, I can talk about it then. I mean, of course, feel free to stop me anytime. It's just a conversation. So anytime you have any questions, even about any given thing I'm talking, please stop me. Okay, so I wanted to tell you two main stories actually, where I think those are the stories where I have learned the most. And actually, if I think about my career, the largest amount of time I've spent so far after BTech is doing a PhD. I spent about 6 years doing my PhD. And then at Theranos, I spent about 5 years at Theranos. So that 11 years was the longest time, and I learned quite a bit in those two experiences of mine. So yeah, you guys mentioned that I belong to the first batch. So it was an interesting batch where, since it was introduced for the first time, we had, like how in IIT, when you get a rank, you have like a certain slot. Oh, this rank to this rank, mechanical engineering. This rank to this rank, chemical engineering. You guys had that. I don't know if it is the same even now. It's been many, many years. But so when biotechnology was introduced in IIT Madras, there was no slot. Nobody knew what this branch is and where exactly it will fit in. So our class actually ended up having people. I think the first person who joined biotechnology was somewhere in the 200s, and there was somebody probably in the last rank, like 2,500, 2,700. So we had this whole range of people. Some people, of course, took it because that's the branch they got, but there were a lot of us who took it because that's what we thought would be very interesting. We felt very passionate about it, and I was also one among them. While joining IIT, I remember in my counseling day, I had a big fight with my dad because I wanted to take biotechnology and he wanted me to take other branches, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, actually even electrical dual degree. He was like, why would you do anything else but electrical engineering? Because he's an electrical engineer himself. So it was an interesting time, and I, on that day, like gave a big speech to my dad about how I'm so passionate about research and that I want to do PhD. And that's why I want to take this branch, which is related to bio. I had been super excited about genetics because I had taken bio in my 11th and 12th. So I gave this big speech that how I'm going to do PhD and I'm going to do such great research that he'll be proud of me later. So fast forward, obviously 4 years in IIT, I went to IISc like you guys mentioned. And then I decided to get to a PhD in US. I didn't even sit in placements. I did nothing else. I just basically, whatever I had told my dad, I had to live up to it. Now it was almost like pressure. I had to do it. So I ended up coming to UCSB to do my PhD. I had a couple of options. That decision-making was not the greatest. I basically chose UCSB because it was in California and it was a PhD program. The two other options I had, one was a master's and the other one was in Chicago. So I was like, I'm just going to go to UCSB. Not a great way to make decision because I had no idea who I was going to join in UCSB. I didn't do any great research on which lab is a good one to join. So definitely, as soon as I came to UCSB, I really fell into crisis because I did not know which lab to join. And interestingly, nothing really stood up to my great vision of what research is. Everything seemed very, yet another small thing, small change to something that already exists. So, I had this really grand vision of research. I thought in my PhD, I'll do research and, maybe even get Nobel Prize, but, like something to that level that people are going to talk about and I'm going to be, amazing. That's what I thought as an 18-year-old and, as a 22-year-old when I was joining my PhD, that's exactly what my view of PhD was. So in pursuit of that, as I already mentioned, I didn't know which lab to join. I ended up going and talking to this one professor. I was in BMSC, which is a interdisciplinary program. So I have access to every professor who's doing anything biology in UCSB, which is a great thing. So I actually ended up going and talking to this professor who was not part of BMSC. He was in MCDB, which is Molecular Cellular Developmental Biology, called Erki Ruslati. What attracted me to him was basically the fact that he was a big shot. Like as I said, I wanted to do great research. I was like, the best thing to do is to go to somebody who's done great research. So I went and talked to Erki. And I read a few papers. I went and sat in front of him with all the papers in my hand, and we're like, you know what, I've read these papers, and it is so whatever you've done is amazing. I'm not going to go into like the research details. If you guys want to know that, we can talk about it later. So I went with the papers, and I told him how I was excited about all of these things. Then he's like, okay. He's the 70-year-old, 6 feet 5 inch tall guy, and I'm just like tiny person going and telling him that, oh, your research is great. Can I join your lab? Okay. And then he's like, what is going on? Why is this person asking me to join the lab? I even told him, so in UCSB, you do this lab rotations. So he asked me, oh, you want to rotate in my lab? I was like, no, I want to join your lab. He's like, wait, but I'm not going to be able to promise you that. I said, okay, but at least I want to know whether you have the possibility of somebody joining your lab. Otherwise, I don't even want to do rotation. I don't care about just rotation. Only if you're taking me, that's when I'm going. I was very, I guess, almost full of myself. I'd just come out of IIT, and what is that? I'm just going to talk to him. I mean, in a way, it actually worked with him. He's the kind of personality who really likes people who are rash and who are, he himself is like that. So for him, it's like, oh, there's this kid who's coming and telling me, I want to join your lab and I'm not going to do anything else. And he's like, okay, great. So he accepted me. He's like, okay, there is a possibility I might take one more student. So I decided to do lab rotation. My previous lab rotation was in Sameer's lab, my other advisor. I had liked Sameer's lab. It had a lot of my friends were already in the lab, so it was very comfortable to be in his lab. But I liked the whole excitement of being in Erki's lab. So that's the whole story. So when I joined Erki's lab, a few weeks in, he was actually quite impressed with me. So he said, okay, I will only allow you to join my lab if there is another professor who is going to be your co-advisor. I was like, okay. So he's like, who have you rotated with? I will talk to them. So I said Sameer's name, and he called Sameer, and Sameer was super excited because he also wanted to collaborate with Erki, and so that's how my whole PhD began, with me being advised by these two professors who don't know each other, who have never worked with each other, and whose research philosophies don't match. So there's Erki, who is in MCDB. Biology professors have a very different way of doing research. It's always hypothesis driven, where you have this question and then you kind of explore and see what happens. And then there is chemical engineering, which is all about an application. You already have in mind what you want to do, and then you make it happen. So the two research philosophies are very, very different. And yes, there was one person who I kind of knew. He is from IIT Delhi, who was my senior. He kind of was, are you sure you want to be co-advised by two professors? It's usually not a great idea. But I thought, what is the big deal, right? I'm just going to be awesome and I'll do this. So I ended up being co-advised, and almost within a couple of months, it was very apparent to me that this is not going to be an easy proposition, because the two professors never met. After the point that they discussed on the phone, they never met. So they never met. I could never have a meeting with them both together. And they just pretty much decided that instead of doing one full-blown PhD, I'm actually going to do two mini PhDs. So I spent my first 2 years in Erki's lab, and then I spent the next 4 years in Sameer's lab. And I did things which were unrelated. That's why I worked on stem cell research, and then on the other end, I worked on nanoparticles. So my time in Erki's lab was interesting. He was very hands-off. So again, I was just doing whatever. I just went and proposed collaborations with random other labs. I started working on many projects at the same time. I don't think I was really getting trained for anything. I was just doing stuff. I did publish like a very small, not so great paper in Erki's lab, but I think very soon he realized that I was going nowhere. So that's when he probably just decided to put me in Sameer's lab, so that he would be more hands-on and I would do something that is more will get me to a place where I get a PhD. When I went to Sameer's lab, I was already in my third year, so I was behaving more like a third year PhD student. But Sameer would treat me more like a first year PhD student because this was the first year I was in his lab. So there used to be a huge clash. I remember getting to my fourth year with nothing to show because there was just one paper that I had published in Erki's lab, which is not good enough to graduate. And often I would get into meetings with Sameer, which would not go well. Like I would be saying something and he would be saying completely different things. And that person who had told me in the beginning that don't join two labs, he was about to graduate at that point. And I remember going to him and, I don't know why nothing is going my way. I don't know how I'm going to graduate because I have nothing to show in Sameer's lab. I've not done any project completely. And of course, Sameer's has a rule that unless you have 3 papers, you cannot graduate. So how am I even going to graduate? So he gave me advice, which I think is one of the most lasting advice. And I think that will be my advice to you too. Listen to what he's saying and be coachable. Whatever he's saying is what you're supposed to do. Don't do other things. He's trying to coach you and you are not doing what he's trying to say. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And anyway, after that point, I did not have any other ammunitions to, go forward in any direction that I wanted. So that's when I started listening to him. And he also admitted that I had lost a lot of time doing random things, but not having a substantial amount to show to my committee in my PhD. But it was actually quite miraculous. I just removed the whole stress and decided to just keep everything that I was thinking about research or grandeur and all of those things aside and just listen to what he was saying. And it was miraculous that in the next 1.5 years, I actually published one paper, and my second paper was about to be sent to PNAS, which is a pretty good journal, and I was quite happy about it. And I also proposed a model which was used in another person's paper, which also went into PNAS. So I actually, by the time I graduated, I ended up having more than 3 papers, and 2 of them in PNAS. And the trick was pretty much just listen to what he's saying, and he's coaching me, and I should allow him to coach me. And this is often, many times I see, there is a lot of people who contact me, IITM undergraduates, or your seniors who are my juniors, or people otherwise too. And often they come and ask me questions, and I tell them, maybe you should be doing this, maybe you should be doing that. And I try to coach them through various things, be it how to do a PhD or how to get your green card or whatever it is. And I often see there are 2 kinds of people: a set of people who are coachable, a set of people who are not. And it is so crazy that people who are coachable have always done things faster. You don't have to rediscover the wheel, right? You can always just follow somebody who has done it or get the wisdom from them and then move on. And I think it's a very, our generation thing, or maybe you guys are not even my generation, you guys are like maybe 1 or 2 generations later, but at least in my generation, we had gotten into this thing about not exactly listening to people, not exactly being coached. So I think my first advice to you guys would be coachable, listen to people. They have already discovered things, so you can just ride on that wave and build more. Why go and do the same thing again? So my second story, this is after I graduated from PhD, and I was about to, I was looking for jobs. And at that point, there was this one company. I don't know, actually, it would have been great if there was a show of hands. But do you guys know Theranos? Like, you guys are aware of Theranos?
There is a show of hands.
Yeah, we know it.
Raise our hands and you can see
Okay,
it.
so you guys know about Theranos. All right, great. No, I just wanted to know because I wanted to make sure that you guys know the history a little bit so that I can, then my story will make a little bit more sense then. So when I graduated from UCSB, there was one company that was very much talked about a lot. And there were articles written which said, oh, this is the next rocket ship, etc. And they contacted me because one of my lab mates was in Theranos, and I was like, oh wow, why not? I mean, if there is a rocket ship, why would I not be part of that, right? I would want my seat on that. So when I joined Theranos, that's where it was in 2012. It was still budding, but there was already a lot of talk about it. So when I got an offer from Theranos, despite a lot of red flags, I decided that, okay, this is the company I'm going to join because it's awesome. It is going to be the next Google in healthcare. So I have to be there. So when I joined Theranos in the first 2 years, it was actually quite good. It was quite uneventful from a newspaper sense, from a media sense. But for me, it was a really good opportunity. I got to learn a lot. However, at some point in 2013, there's always something weird about the place. I always had this stress. Like I always have this stress about going to work because there were lots of weird things, like people were awarded for spending more time at work, not because they did something, but just because they were there at work. There were lots of weird things that used to happen in the company, which always sort of stressed me out. But I was on a rocket ship, so whatever. Even if it is a stressful rocket ship, I'll just be on it, right? So then so around towards the end of 2014, 2013, 2014 was when Theranos had got a lot of money from Walgreens, and Walgreens kind of tied Elizabeth's hands and said, now you got to put this in Walgreens. You've been telling me for such a long time that your devices are ready, etc. So we need it to be in the Walgreens right now. So I was working with the. So just to give a nutshell, what Theranos was doing, right? Theranos was developing this all-in-one device which would run every possible blood test and give you the result in a very short amount of time with only a few drops of blood. That was like the main goal and vision, which is a great vision, but there are some flaws in that. We'll come to that in a bit. So I think this was in 2014. I belonged to this group. I was an experimental biologist at that point. And I belonged to this group which was developing a blood test for all the cells. So, the CBC, your WBC, the RBC, those kinds of tests. Now that Walgreens had told us that these tests have to be in the lab, I was put on this task, and our device was not yet ready. So I was put on this task to evaluate some other devices which would also run blood samples with a finger stick blood into the lab. So I was made in charge of this validation. So I began this validation study. I was given very little time. I think I was doing it within a week or two. In general, when you're doing a validation study, it's a long process. You need to do some precision studies, which take a month. You need to get samples of patients who are diseased, or who are not dead, but who are having a disease, and then see how the devices perform on those. But of course, 15 days was not good enough, and everybody wanted it now. Actually, they wanted it 1 week ago. So it's not like I had a lot of time to sort of do all the validation studies. And we had done a few validation studies, and I brought it, but I was very stressed. I did not want to have this device run any patient samples without us doing all the studies. And I brought it up to my manager, and he's like, hey, don't worry about it. This is how startups work. And I was like, oh, maybe this is how startup works. What do I know? I have just graduated, and this is the first time I'm working in a lab. And moreover, there was all of these newspapers who were publishing such raving reviews about Elizabeth, and she was on top of every possible magazine on earth. I was like, okay, so everything is going well. This must be how it goes. And then I'm like, okay, I am uncomfortable, but maybe it's okay. Maybe I just don't know what's going on. I remember bringing it up to my manager's manager, who is the VP of Asset Systems, and he kind of brushed it off, saying, hey, that doesn't matter. How often do you get a disease sample? It is mostly going to be normal people, so it doesn't matter. Let's just get this into the lab, and we can continue doing the studies. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. This is an approved device, so maybe it's fine. We can just do that. A few months down the line, we got a call from a doctor. And the doctor wanted to send, the doctor had sent one of his patients to our Theranos center to get the blood tested. But this patient was actually this 4-year-old girl who had leukemia. She had very high platelet counts. And because of which she had to take this particular drug on a continuous basis. And the drug is supposed to make her platelet count lower. And if that happens, then of course she's sort of cured, or she's more in a stable state of her leukemia. And this particular patient was sent to Theranos' diagnostic center because she had she's such a small girl. You don't want to collect a lot of blood. Theranos' device offers this opportunity to measure really small amount of blood, and that was the reason why he had sent her there. And we had, of course, promptly given her data back, sent her data back. But what had happened is that our device, which we had not tested for samples of patients who are ill, had shown that her platelet count had actually come down. And the doctor, thankfully, decided that he wanted to verify. He sent her twice. She used to do this test every month. So first month it came down. He was surprised, but he was like, okay, great, maybe the drug is working. Second month he sent that it was still down, and he began suspicious. Like, okay, is this really true? He needs to verify it. And thankfully, I'm so glad that the doctor thought about it this way and doubted the result. He sent her to Stanford. Also to get her data, her blood run there. And what Stanford result showed was that her platelet count had actually not come down at all. It was very high. So we had actually given her false results. And then when the doctor called us, I was completely shocked, because I had brought this very same point up before, and now I had allowed this sample to have been run on the device, and now I had come really close to having this patient not take her medication, and I don't know what would have happened. When we went back and saw the data, there was a particular way the device was actually analyzing the data. Her platelets were very small, but large in number, because of which there was a long tail which the device had ignored. So if you include the long tail also into the calculation of how many platelets she has, it would come back to the high number that Stanford had predicted. And that was a bell was ringing in my head. I'm like, and a red alarm was ringing in my head. I was like, oh my God. All this while, when I have had these questions, when I've had these doubts, I just went with everything that other people are telling me. I just went with everything that the newspapers are telling me, the media is telling me, even though I had this gut feeling that something is wrong. We are not doing something right. And I'm so glad that the doctor actually sent her to Stanford. Otherwise, I would have come so close to maybe even killing somebody, and because of giving the wrong results. This, after I've left Theranos, and after this incident, I've had so many sweaty nights. I've had so many nights that I've woken up thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And I think it's still something that I always think about, as to how important it is for you to listen to your gut feeling, for you to, first of all, develop that instincts of what is right and what's wrong, and then act on them, and not to just believe what other people are saying, not to believe what the newspapers are saying, and not to believe something just because somebody's calling it a trend and somebody's just going on showering money on something like this. So that's my second story for you guys, and that's my second and most important lesson I think I have learned in my entire life, which is to always question and not just follow any trend that comes your way, and definitely try to understand where your gut feeling is coming from and verify that if it is right, then you need to quit from that place. You need to act on it right away and not just sit around just because somebody else is telling you that it's okay. It was a very hard thing, though. I must agree that seeing all of those things in the newspapers, seeing all of the things that other people were talking, because almost everybody who worked at Theranos, whenever I discussed with them, hey, what's going on, they would always tell me, hey, you're just overreacting. This is not really the way it is how companies work. But I knew internally that there was something wrong. And, a few months down the line, exactly what I was thinking happened. There was the whole set of articles that was written by WSJ. There was the whole audit by CMS, which is the authoritative regulatory body in the US. And in fact, Theranos had to cancel, or I don't remember the right word, but they had to make sure that every result that had been sent by Theranos in the last, 2 years of Theranos actually running patient samples had to be voided, because the CMS authorities were not happy with all the different things that were happening in Theranos and all the different mistakes that Theranos had made in terms of running the patient samples. Cool. So that's my second slightly morbid story. I had a few more things that I wanted to tell you guys, but I don't have like any story or anything for it. They're all, as much as I don't want to be prescriptive, but I think in this case, I'm just going to be prescriptive and tell you some things that I have learned in the last 15 years that are going to be helpful in your career. So the number one thing that I have always thought about, and I have seen it help people in their career, is learn to code. I don't know what your curriculum is right now in the biology, biosciences, or bioengineering. I don't know what's the name of the department now, but I don't know what your curriculum is. I know you will be doing a lot of biology courses, and maybe you guys are going to pursue your PhDs or research or whatever. And it doesn't matter what you pursue, learn to code. And I maybe you're already learning it in IIT. We just had one CS 101 and that's it. So my advice to you guys is learn to code. It doesn't matter what language it is or what it is, but that is going to take you a long way. Be it what happened in my PhD, in Theranos, in my MBA, or in the last job that I've had, which is consulting. If you are a person who can code, you can automate everything, and you will be the person who's going to be respected. Job is not just for money, right? It's also other things that happen. So learn to code. The next thing I have for you is always ask questions. So when I joined my PhD, I literally did not talk to any other person who had done a PhD. I just didn't even realize what it means to spend 6 years on a particular in a particular place. And of course, I didn't listen to people, as I mentioned to you, even in my PhD. Ask questions, verify what you've already thought of. I made a promise to my dad and I decided that's what I have to do and nothing else. I'm not even going to verify what it is to do a PhD or what it is to do anything for that matter. So always ask questions, talk to people who've done this, and verify for yourself whether your assumptions are right. I'm not saying you should not do research. I'm just saying that if you want to do it, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Make sure you've understood everything. Talk to people, ask questions. My next important lesson that I have learned through the many times I've looked for jobs, and especially looking for jobs in 2020, is network, network, network. Talk to as many people as you can, as I said previously, but network with people, tell them what you want, what you're looking for, and see what they are talking about. And most importantly, many people kind of shy away from networking because it seems very artificial. But you have to remember that when you're talking to people, you are also giving them something. So for example, when people come and talk to me, IIT juniors of mine who come and talk to me, of course, they have their question on where they should apply or whether their resume looks good or whatever it is. But in return, they are also giving me something. I get the feeling of having helped people. I get to listen to what's happening in the world right now. So don't feel shy that you're just going and talking to people for no reason. Why should they help you? That's a wrong way to think about it. Everybody wants to help. I think that's the better attitude to have, and you should network. Then the next mistake that people make when they are networking is they never follow through. You need to come back and show gratitude. You need to say what happened to whatever I advised you or whoever advised you. So that's the follow through that most people don't do, and that's why they fail in networking. So it's important to not just network, but also be genuine and have gratitude and come back and follow through and say, okay, this is what you said, and this is how it all ended up being. And last but not the least, and the most important thing, which I have told myself almost after every significant period of my life, is have fun. It doesn't really matter. Have fun and involve and enjoy. Even now, the last few months when I've been looking for my job, change in my career, I've been fretting. I wish I had enjoyed it more. So have fun, enjoy. There are just so many things you can do in life. Even if one door closes, it's always going to be so many more doors that are going to open. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. If you're done, ma'am, we can open the session for a discussion and if there are any questions from the audience.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll begin with a question. I hope there are a lot of questions following up. Um, so you did mention yourself as a very passionate, very ambitious girl who finished her undergraduate and wanted to pursue PhD. And you did make a transition to a management program. And how was the transition, and why was the transition? And
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I often get this question. Um, I had as you mentioned, when I was graduating from my IIT, I was super excited about research and I was very passionate about it. In fact, up until maybe third year of my PhD, I thought that I wanted to be a professor. So it was, I think there were a lot of things that happened in my PhD, which sort of moved me away from doing academic research to try and get into industry. So um, basically, I think it was a realization of how whatever I'm doing is probably only going to affect anybody, if at all, in a few decades, or not. So I felt like I wanted to be much closer to the patients, much closer to what's happening um, in real world than be in my own research world where I would go on doing some research, but I can't really see the impact of what's happening of what I'm doing. So that's when I actually transitioned to industry. And while I was transitioning to industry, this time I was a little bit more, I guess, intelligent. So I actually talked to a lot of people. And when I talked to a lot of people, I learned that there are multiple ways you can be in industry. Of course, one way is the way I actually joined industry, which is being a researcher, hands-on scientist in a startup, or you could also join a big company. But the other thing I had learned is there is ultimately in industry, right? There's a lot of decisions that are made by business that is what rest of the departments are going to kind of execute, or that is going to follow. It is the business which will tell you what the market really needs, and then you come back to, okay, now you develop this test, or now you develop this assay. So I had actually already known that when I was joining Theranos, that there were multiple other ways to enter industry, and probably a better way would be in business, because then you would be making more impactful decisions. And what I was going for was having that higher impact on whatever is being developed. But anyway, at that point, I got this opportunity to join Theranos, so I was at Theranos, and everything that happened with Theranos too, bad decisions that were made by the leadership. Often people ask me, did the scientists really do anything? And I get quite offended by it, because I was a scientist there. We were actually doing a lot of good things, and unlike what most people think, things work and don't work. When people think about like devices, or what science is, they always think about it as like a black and white, it worked or it didn't work. But it's actually not like that. When you are productizing something, there's a long process. Yes, it worked on the bench, then it probably worked when you did a small scale clinical trial, then it didn't work when you did a bigger clinical trial. So whether something works or doesn't work is it's a very gray area. It works and it doesn't work at the same time, depending on which part of the product development you are in. In my Theranos experience, I was quite exposed to how bad leadership or bad business decisions can actually impact what's happening to your product. I mean, people put in what $700 million into Theranos, and it became nothing. So that's when I think it was somewhere around the time in 2014-15 is when I wrote my GMAT. Still not sure whether I wanted to do my MBA, but eventually, once the whole fall of Theranos happened, I was quite determined that I should be going more towards business. And having Theranos on my resume was not the greatest thing at that time. I could have made the transition to business without doing MBA, but that was the best way I found at that point, given Theranos was already on my resume at that point. That's when I decided to do MBA.
A quick follow-up to that. You had already spent 6 years on your PhD and 5 years working. Did you have some anxiety about running out of time to go back to school at that point? Because this is something me a lot, spending a lot of time at something and then realizing that I don't want to do it at all, or I want to do something really different.
Yeah, I would say yes. I was very anxious. I mean, it would have been great if I had just tried things and quit much sooner. But I think that mindset that I came out of with from my BTech, where I have decided to do this and I'm going to do this type of a mentality. I think it took me a while to shake it off. Number one, I think I almost spent like 5 years in Theranos, which is like another PhD. I should have quit it earlier. Definitely, I should have quit it earlier. Not so much because I had to do an MBA, but just because I don't think I should have spent so much time to realize that that's not where I wanted to work. I actually knew it earlier than that, but I did not act on it. So my advice to anybody who is not sure, which is fine. I think there is no reason to be sure. Actually, it's harder to be sure than not sure. Now that I've thought about it so much, it's like, what was I thinking? Why was I so sure about my PhD? I don't know. Yeah, so definitely, I definitely was very anxious about it. But there is something called sunk cost fallacy. Just because you spent so many years over there doesn't mean you have to continue being there. I mean, just because I've done research for what now, 11 years, I should be continuing to do research. If that doesn't excite me, it doesn't excite me. I need to move on and do something else. So it took a lot of conversation with myself and with other people to convince myself that this is okay. I mean, I almost felt guilty. Actually, I almost felt guilty that I'm going to do an MBA now, and I thought my parents and my siblings and my friends will react very weirdly. But it was so funny. Actually, everybody was very supportive. They were like, "Yeah, that makes sense." I think, in fact, my dad was like, "Oh, I was telling you a long time ago that I should do an MBA." But anyway, that's separate. He wanted to prove his point. But yeah, mostly everybody was very supportive. And the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? Yes, I am. I think, what was I? I was 31 when I went to do my PhD. Sorry, my MBA. 30, I think. Yeah, 31 when I was doing my MBA. And it's fine. I mean, I think it was a tough decision to make. I think, I know, Nandakumar, you said that I went to Wharton, but I actually went to INSEAD and I did a exchange program with Wharton. So I chose INSEAD because A, it's in Europe, B, it's a 1-year program, and I could get back to workforce sooner than later. So I think I made a compromise like that. I did not choose some of the B schools that I got in US because they are 2-year programs. Yeah, that was how I thought about it. Somebody asked me a question here. Did you rethink about going back to academia after Theranos or MBA? Not really. Although I think I've never really thought about it as like, oh my God, I wish I was a professor. No, but I do. So my husband is a postdoc, and he's also your senior. He's my classmate from biotechnology, IIT Madras, 2006. So he is a postdoc, and he is on his way to become a professor. So I vicariously live that dream of being a professor through him, number one. And number two, I don't think I could be doing what he's doing. Like the kind of research he's doing and like the number of hours he spends in the lab, I don't think I wish to do that. So yes and no. I think sometimes when I look at how he is a master of his own time and how he can do whatever he wants to, I feel that, oh my God, I wish I was also doing that. But, I'm happier about, making a little bit more money and not having to live that stress of trying to become a professor. Yeah, I'm glad he is doing it though. Do you have any more questions?
Okay, I'll ask another question, ma'am. In your LinkedIn about, you did mention something about how you are passionate about how technology changes behavior of people. Could you elaborate what you really mean by that?
Yeah, I guess I've not yet done that. This is just what I'm passionate about, or this is where I spend a lot of time thinking. So this is actually a very personal story which led me to this. So in 2015, I was in a diagnostic company, right? I was in Theranos, and I belong to a family I have 3 siblings, so we have 4 children, and every one of us is an engineer, and my dad is an engineer. So we don't have we don't have any doctors or anybody at home. So whenever anything happens, people always come to me. So if they get a result of some sort, then they'll be like, what do you think about it? Because I am the one who comes closest to understanding anything results, anything imaging, or anything medicine. In 2015, it had become my responsibility to sort of make sure that everybody is healthy. So that I keep a tab on everybody's blood tests, etc. So as usual, I did the same for my parents, and often I made them like go do some tests, and often kept track of it and ensure that they did the tests. And my mom was visiting US, and suddenly one fine day, with no prior intimation, she was unable to walk, and I actually rushed her to the emergency room at Stanford and found out that she was having a heart attack. So anyway, that ended up being a long 1-month stay in the Stanford hospital with her having multiple complications. I'm not going to go into that story. However, that got me thinking as to what have I been doing. I mean, it was my responsibility to make sure that everybody's fine. And I have been asking them to go and do all the EKGs and TMTs and whatnot. How can it be possible that she still had a heart attack? Like, how could I have not detected it early? That was the question I always asked myself. And what I realized is I was only making her go and take the test, but there was nobody analyzing it. It so happens that in India, and maybe also in the US, I'm not sure, where people can go get this package where you can get these tests done, and nobody really analyzes it. Or even if somebody analyzes it, there is no behavioral change that happens because of it. My mom got these tests in her EKG. It very clearly said that there is something called a T inversion. I don't know how to read EKGs, but there were some things that were pointed out, and she never went to the doctor. She never made any change. I mean, what that test results had told her 2 years earlier is that there is a blockage in the heart, and she should have gotten an angioplasty instead of getting to a point where she needed a bypass surgery. So that's what is that thought process, is where I think that there are a lot of things that we are doing through these tests and these diagnostics, preventative medicine. But what is not happening is that behavioral change. Yes, I got a bad cholesterol result, but am I doing anything about it? No. So there is a lot of behavioral change that needs to go with it, which is not happening. And I feel that we can potentially use technology for it. How? I'm not sure. There are a few companies who are being successful in doing something like this. So if you've heard recently, there was a merger of Livongo and Teladoc, which is on very similar concept, where Livongo is a company which helps people through diabetes. Diabetes is one of the most common chronic disease which leads to a lot of complications and a huge healthcare cost. So that's what they are helping with. They have this whole model where they have an app, but they also have a coach who calls you up and make sure that you are following up, make sure you're eating properly, you're taking your medications required. So yeah, so that's my thought process in that statement. Salim has a question. What would your advice for your first year student? Possible change and opportunities in the field in the future. Okay. So your first question, what would be your advice for first year students? I think this would be my advice to all year students, not just first year students. Participate in a lot of things. IIT or undergrad or that age is a time where you can do a lot of things, and a lot of opportunities just present to yourself. You have Shastra, you have Sarang, you have just like so many things happening. Participate in a lot of things. I belong to that category. In my class, we used to have this group which had a secret, or rather, the rest of the students used to call us Maggu Gumbal. Okay, and I belong to that. Maggu Gumbal, basically, what did we do? We basically just studied and got good grades. And when I think back, I was like, oh my God, I want to go back and redo IIT just to not mug so much. Like, how I wish I participated more in Shastra, more in Sarang, just explored different parts of my personality. Sorry. I just got a call. But yeah, how I wish I participated in other things. Like, at that point, it seemed like getting grades was the most important thing, so that I can get to the best school in the US and get to do my PhD in the best place. But all those other things of organizing events, I don't know, participating in lit events, participating in dance, whatever, anything, they add so much value or so many dimensions to your personality that take you much longer than just those grades. So, for example, if you're a lit person and can write well, you can go so many directions. You can do, you can be a very successful person. Actually, writing is such an important thing. Like, I write day in and day out. I write emails, I write slides, I write documents. Any of those things, if you can develop early on, it's great. So I can think about every possible co-curricular and extracurricular activity and what it will lead to in your future. So my advice to all of you guys is make use of your time wisely. Like, do other things, take up leadership roles, participate in, I don't know, physical activities like dance or sports or whatever it is. I mean, sports is amazing. What you learn in sports, I think you can never learn anywhere else. How to be a team member, how to participate, how to make sure that, how can you put the team before yourself? It's such an important trait. I see so many people often fail in industry, or for that matter, in anywhere, by not being a good team player, or on the other hand, by not being a good leader. So both of those things you get to learn when you interact more with people and do various activities. So that would be my advice. What are your opinions and observations on evolution of biotech over years and possible changes and opportunities in the field in the future? So biotech is a very broad word which includes so many different things. So when I was joining IIT, right, there was this whole thing called IT boom. I don't know, maybe you guys were like kids then, or you have no idea that there was a word like this called IT boom, which was kind of busted in 2000 because of, something happened in 2000, and there were a lot of these companies that kind of fell, their stocks fell because of year 2000 and some other wrong bets that people had made. So similarly, when I was joining, people said there's something called BT boom, okay? And there is no boom, okay? There's nothing called BT boom. BT and IT are never the same thing. Computer science and everything to do with computer is so integrated in everything we do, every small thing that we do, and that's not how biotech is. So that's number one. I don't know if you guys are even thinking that way. If you were, then there's no such thing. So having said that, I think there is a lot of changes that are happening in healthcare, and it is definitely at a place where almost everybody is interested in it. So when I talk about, I'm not talking about specifically biotech as in like medicines and those kinds of, I'm just going to go very broad and talk to you about everything healthcare, which includes pharma, biotech, diagnostics, healthcare, life sciences, all of these things. I think there is a lot of changes that are happening. In terms of research, I think one big trend that I've seen from a pharma angle is all of these improvements that are happening in gene therapy and immunotherapy. So there's a huge push for that, and I think we are at a point where all the research has been done, and there is a lot of drugs that are coming out and will be coming out in the near future in gene therapy. In the last 2 years, when I've been a management consultant, I've done several projects helping big pharma companies with their gene therapy commercial strategies. So gene therapy is going to be a big deal. When I think about diagnostics, it's all about precision medicine, where I don't know if you guys have heard about these types of tests where you can do something called liquid biopsy, where you can measure something going on somewhere else in your body through a blood test. So that's been there, and that's still going to be in the forefront. So in diagnostics, I think the biggest thing that's happening is personalization, precision medicine, where you can help develop better drugs by being very precise to what the patient cohort is or what the patient is. So there's a lot of things happening there, and of course there's genomics, where this is a field which has had a lot of promise from a long time, but it still hasn't been realized, and we're yet to see how it's going to be realized. But of course, there is a lot of information in our genes, and we are only now seeing the tip of the iceberg, where a lot of discoveries, and be it either in terms of what drugs or how we can modify our lifestyle, I think is coming up and will be coming up for a long time. I think the main reason why the field is kind of stalled or slower is because of data privacy and other security issues, which I think we will hopefully be able to solve and use this data for a greater good, especially during this COVID times, right? That's the largest changes in healthcare have happened during COVID, where people have become more open about their data, more drugs. Like people would have never thought a vaccine would have been developed in 1 year. It usually takes so many years. So a lot of potential exists now in terms of everybody has recognized that how important it is for us to be at the forefront of healthcare and fight these pandemics, etc. So I think it's a great time that way. Then the last thing that I've been observing is in terms of data. There is, of course, a lot of data out there to talk about, to kind of mine and figure out what makes sense. Like even for that matter, now with COVID, there is this whole thing about long haulers, where there are people who continue to have these symptoms for a long time. Why does that happen? What about their genetics, or what about their health history is causing that? So there's a lot of progress that is going to happen in data. And this is the field that I have personally been super excited about in the recent past, and that's why I'm making the transition. You can, pharma companies, diagnostic companies, tech companies, insurance companies, actually name it, everybody is trying to get to this healthcare data, because whoever has data has the power, and everybody is trying to get there and trying to make a difference, make a change in healthcare. So I think that's going to be a big deal. Data has made a lot of machine learning, and data has made a lot of changes to a lot of different industries, and I expect the same thing to happen to healthcare pretty soon. I assume, so I think the next question, I assume the transition from academic to industry would have required more input. Oh, okay, yeah, and then. Okay, so I think I'll answer these two questions as to what did I do to boost my CV to go from academic to industry, and how did I use my knowledge from my PhD in my management consulting. So, okay. So, there was an advice I gave you just before this, which is do lots of other things and not just study or get grades. That would have been great to have on my resume to make the transition, but I did not. I'm just telling you that was my thought then. Like, why did I ever not do any courtship or courtship or anything? That would have been great, because that's one way to show leadership. So when I realized that I wanted to go to industry from academia, there were two things I was thinking about. Actually, from my PhD, I was thinking about joining management consulting directly, or industry in a more research thing. The two things require completely different types of skill sets that you need to show in your CV. For getting into industry, not management consulting, diagnostics or pharma, what's important is what kind of techniques you know. So I remember in the last year when I had decided that I wanted to go into industry, I spent a lot of time perfecting my techniques, perfecting or learning new techniques. It's not so much about how your research panned out or what papers you got. I mean, yes, those are important, but it's also about what techniques you know. So, for example, I ran a lot of cytometry assays, which is your flow cell. I ran HPLC. I learned how to run HPLC, etc. So I was learning more techniques to sort of boost my resume and add that to my CV to get to a place where I can showcase my resume to industry. And actually, cytometry is what helped me get my job in Theranos, because I was actually going to do cell-based assays, which is basically cytometry. And what was the other question? Oh, yeah. Management consulting. I don't know how many of you know what management consulting is, so I'll just give you a plug in like a few seconds. Management consulting is where many different companies come to you with a business question that they are unable to answer. It's usually very complex and ambiguous, and you basically do research on that, talk to key opinion leaders in that field, and do a lot of analysis to figure out what is the best answer to their question. Usually it's a very gray area where there is no one answer. So for example, it is like, oh, we have this drug, it works for disease X, Y, and Z, which one should we go after? Which one should we do clinical trial for? So then you need to analyze a number of different components, like how easy to do a clinical trial, how easy is it to get How much will it cost? How much money can you make? Will the doctors accept it? Will the patients accept it? Will the insurance pay for it? So there are all of these different parameters you'll think about to answer that question. So actually, my academic work is directly applicable to consulting, because many a times the questions they're asking also has a scientific component to it. So for example, the project that I just described to you, there is a whole clinical and regulatory, which depends on clinical and regulatory question involved in the question of which disease should we go after, for which I had to read numerous research papers, understand how this drug's mechanism is, because MOA is one of the most important things by which you can decide how successful this drug is going to be. So yes, I used not very specific knowledge about what I learned in my PhD, but the essence of how to do scientific thinking. How do I think about what these research papers are saying, or even for that matter, telling things like, do I even believe this research paper or not, right? Because there are lots of research papers out there which you don't believe. So, even to that level. So it's the thought process that you learned in your PhD, which is the scientific way of thinking that comes in handy in your consulting.
Ma'am, you said this was your last question, but I really have one question out of curiosity. But
sure.
You did work parallelly throughout your PhD program in an institute called SPP.
Yeah.
What did you do there? And I know that their work is all very innovative there, and a lot of transition, healthcare transition work goes on, immediate application kind of work goes on in the institute. Could you explain more about that institute?
Yes. So the reason I worked in that institute was because Erki Ruslati, my co-advisor, one of my advisors, belonged to that institute. So he was the president of it used to be called Burnham Institute of Medical Research at that time. So he was the president of that, and he had moved to UCSB, and he had set up a satellite Burnham Institute. And since I belonged to his lab, that's why I belonged to Burnham too. So I didn't do any special work over there. My PhD also belonged to Burnham because Erki belonged to Burnham. And of course, I got to attend and listen to all of their research and attend some of their events, etc., which was quite enriching. And of course, that really helped me learn more about science. But yeah, I didn't do anything special. Cool.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, guys. This was really fun. Hopefully, this was helpful. Yeah, feel free to connect with me. And if you guys have more questions, you can always reach out to me, and we can talk again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, all right.
We'll have a quick picture. If whoever's interested can turn on the video, and if it's fine with you.
Yeah, okay. So my photo will come on there. You know what to do, right? You'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take a screenshot.
Okay.
Yes,
cool.
I request whoever's fine with it to please turn on your videos. Yep. We're good to go. Thank you. It was a very fun session.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.